good evening, and welcome. I'm Christian Panaite, Associate Curator of Exhibitions at the New York Historical Society. Before we begin tonight's discussion, I would like to thank our trustees, our Chairman's Council, and all of our members and other generous donors. Your support allows New York Historical to continue to pursue our mission. Thank you. We are open on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, so make sure you booked your timed tickets on our website, newyorknyhistory.org. I want to let you know that the presentation will last about 50 minutes, and we will also have plenty of time for questions and other comments and stories about Bob Hope you might want to share. Please use the Q&A function on your Zoom screen at any point during the presentation. We have disabled the chat function, so please make sure to use the Q&A. And we'll try to get to as many questions as time allows. Now, I'm gonna share my screen so we can start this journey into Bob Hope and World War II. So Ready for Laughter, Bob Hope and World War II is organized by the National World War II Museum with support from the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation. I had the great privilege of being its coordinating curator here at New York Historical, but I'd like to give a shout out to Kimberly Guys, its original curator. I'd also like to thank the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation for hosting me. It's been actually a couple of years since I went to St. Augustine and had the opportunity to do research in the rich Hope archives. Had to, checked out the World Golf Hall of Fame and the Bob Hope exhibition there. It was all amazing. So thank you for having me. It was incredible. And I had, thanks to that trip, I was able to curate the Gift of Laughter exhibition, and you'll get a sneak peek of that as well. Now, Bob Hope has a unique place in the history of World War II. In the darkest of times, he lifted the spirits of millions at home and abroad. For the people at home, he would make them better understand a soldier's life, their struggles, their fears. For the ones away, through his comedy, he would bring them some much needed respite and a reminder of home. And the thousands upon thousands of letters he received, he would receive about 38,000 pieces of mail a week during the war, really are a testament to that. And by the way, all the letters were often addressed, most of the letters were often addressed as simply to Bob Hope in Hollywood. He was known as the home front ambassador, GI Bob, and America's #1 soldier in grease paint. And I like to begin this presentation with Bob's own words from the preface to the I Never Left Home, a book published in 1944 in which he recalls his experience touring in the European theater of war the year prior. It's a very, very powerful quote. I saw your sons and your husbands, your brothers and your sweethearts. I saw how they worked, played, fought, and lived. I saw some of them die. I saw more courage, more good humor in the face of discomfort, more love in an era of hate, and more devotion to duty that could exist under tyranny. I saw American minds, American skill, and American strength breaking the backbone of evil. He was born Leslie Towns Hope in Southeast London on May 29, 1903. His father, William Henry, was a stonemason, and his mother, Avis, an aspiring singer who did teach Bob how to sing. In March 1908, Hope arrived on Ellis Island with his 5 brothers and his mother. As Bob would later put it, I left England at the age of 4 when I found out I couldn't be king. The family settled in Cleveland, where his father had been looking for work for the previous year. Now, he was a rambunctious boy who loved to sing and dance. And at the age of 12, when Charlie Chaplin contests were in vogue, he dressed up as the silent film tramp and won the first prize at the Luna Park contest. And apparently with the prize money, it is known that he bought a new stove for his mother. So lots of mouths to feed in that family. 7 boys actually were raised. Hope worked a variety of jobs as a newsboy, a butcher's assistant, a shoe salesman, and perhaps most interesting, he was an amateur boxer in 1919, fighting under the name of Packy East after he got inspired taking the name of Packy McFarland, who was a big boxer at the time. He dropped out of school at the age of 16 and became naturalized through his father in 1920 and officially changed his name from Leslie to Lester. And you'll hear more about the story of how he got to be named Bob later on. Now, through his teenage years, he would frequent the vaudeville houses in Cleveland. He sang on the trolley on the way to Luna Park. He took dance classes, but ultimately vaudeville became Hope's school of show business. And through the 1920s, he toured the Midwest and the South first with a friend from dance school, Lloyd Durbin, playing in some 300 theaters, being paid $40 a week. In the mid-1920s, he started performing with George Byrne. George and Hope, and I love this, they would bill themselves as dance medians. The act including, the light comedic gags, but mostly dancing. And the two of them even appeared in a small part on Broadway in Sidewalks of New York in 1927. And apparently they got fired pretty much after the first month. Just, the show got so big that they weren't really needed anymore. And actually one of the first original vaudeville dance routines was recreated in Hope's April 9th, 1950 episode of Star Spangled Review on NBC. So if you have a chance to find that, it's a really fun clip to watch. Now, Hope discovered his MC, the Master of Ceremonies talent by accident during a 3-day stint in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. At the end of a performance, he stayed on the stage a little longer to announce the upcoming acts for the next week and ended up with a 5-minute comedic routine. From here on, he would build his solo comedic act. And then he was first billed as Bob Hope in 1928 in Chicago at the Stratford Theater. And apparently he picked Bob because the name had a friendly tone, kind of a high fellas to it. There is also a story of him being billed Ben Hope. Apparently he saw Ben Hope on a marquee when the manager was placing his name. And when he told the manager that his name is actually Bob, the manager replied, well, but who knows? Who cares about this? But with each show, he learned to become more spontaneous, listen to his audience, and lead into the jokes with that famous side smile. I'm sure you know it. I'm sure you know it from all the movies and all the Bob Hope TV specials. Now, his big New York breakthrough came in fall of 1929 when he was signed to play at Proctor's Theater. Let me go back a little. On 86th and Broadway, and that's not far actually from New York Historical. When he arrived at the theater, he asked how the audience was, and he was told it is the toughest in New York, which makes me nervous for my own presentation. How many of you are around that area of town? Now, his dream, keep going to this slide, but his dream of finally performing at the Palace Theater in New York came to fruition in 1931. And for the next 5 years, he would perform in Broadway plays such as Ballyhoo of 1932, a Vaudeville Review, Roberta, and 1936 Cole Porter's Red, Hot, and Blue, which really turned him into a Broadway star. But at the same time, he was also shooting movies in New York, most of them shorts. He signed a series of films with educational pictures and Astoria pictures. And you can see his very first movie, it's about 19 minutes, called Going Spanish, that was released in 1934. He was not happy with it whatsoever. Actually, he said that it's so bad that when they catch the bank robber, John Dillinger, they're going to make him sit through it twice. I watched it yesterday, and yeah, I sat through it. So you can too. By Bob's own account, he did not care much for seeing himself in movies at first, but that changed. So I want to share with you this quote in which he describes Hollywood, and compares Hollywood to New York early in his career. He says, "Hollywood was for peasants, I decided. New York was my town. The New Yorkers were sophisticated enough to understand and enjoy my suave, sterling style. Hollywood was Hicksville." Now, while performing on Broadway, in Roberta, Hope was introduced to Dolores Hope. She was born in Harlem. Dolores Reed was her stage name. Dolores Defina was the maiden name. She had a professional singing career, and she met Bob at Vogue Club in Manhattan in Midtown. He described seeing her as love at first song. And they got married in 1934. They actually split their birthdays on May 28th, since she was born on May 27th. He was born on May 29th. In 1934, the couple actually lived at 65 Central Park West, so not far from New York Historical, and I do wonder which exhibitions he saw at New York Historical at the time. She wore the uniform you see on the right while serving as head of the Southern California chapter of the American Women's Voluntary Services, the largest women's volunteer organization during the war. And I was just rewatching an interview with her and Bob the other day, and she mentions how she would pack and deliver food to the servicemen in charge of the anti-aircraft units. And they also picked the crops that would have otherwise, rotted in the fields, since all the workers were out on the front lines. And in the same interview, Bob mentions that every morning he would salute this uniform. She traveled with Bob for many of the later USO tours. One of her most memorable performances was for the military during the 1990-1991 tour during Operation Desert Shield, and when she performed a White Christmas for the troops stationed in Saudi Arabia. Now, Bob and Dolores actually moved to Hollywood in 1937, and that's when, by next year, Bob's big break in movies came with the big broadcast of 1938 with W.C. Fields, Shirley Ross, and Dorothy Lamour. And Hope's musical number, Thanks for the Memory, would become a staple of his TV specials and USO tours. The lyrics changed to fit different occasions. And I do have to also pause here to mention that Bob met Bing Crosby in 1932 or 33 outside Friars Club. And by 1940, they were producing the legendary Road to series of movies, starting with Road to Singapore in 1940, ending with Road to Hong Kong in 1962. If you have a favorite movie from the series, please let us know in the Q&A. Now, Thanks for the Memory plays a very important part in Bob Hope's history and of getting involved with World War entertainment during World War II. According to Bob, he performed his first wartime routine on board of Queen Mary on the way back from Europe. Dolores and they were in Paris when news of Germany, of the news of the war, news. They were in Paris. When they traveled back to England, they boarded the Queen Mary ship, and that's when the news of England declaring war on Germany came through. He was asked by the captain to perform in the first class to relieve the anxiety of the passengers, and who were very much afraid that the ship would be targeted by the German U-boats. So this is in the ship's lounge. He sang Thanks for the Memory. He pretty much created the new tunes on the spot. And again, I found some footage of him recalling the verses. Here's a bit of it. Thanks for the memory of his great ocean trip on England's ship. Thanks for the memory. Some slept on the floor, some in the corridor. But I was very lucky. My room had gentlemen written above the door. Now, such variations of Thanks for the Memory can also be seen in two manuscripts in the exhibition. They could not be more different from one another. On the left, you have a certificate, thank you pretty much, letter from Selman Air Base Field in Louisiana. And here the troops are showing their delight of having been entertained by Hope and Francis Langford. If you don't see the writing, I'll just quote a little. Thanks for the memories of Selman's night of fun, a show superbly done. And on the right, you have the a page from the Journal of POW Joseph Veronick. He was shot down over Bremen in November of 1943. And here he describes pretty much the actual air battle and how everyone fought so valiantly. And again, a brief quote: "Thanks for the memory of flights to Germany across the cold North Sea. We drifted out of formation, we jumped, what a sensation. Our job was done, we had our fun, thanks for the memory." Now, Bob's real breakthrough in radio came when he booked NBC's The Pepsodent Show. He was on the radio before, but this was his own show. From 1938 to 1948, the show aired on Tuesday evenings, which worked great for Bob, who recalled then on Wednesday actually was payday. He could take the check home back to Dolores. Unlike Jack Benny, for example, Hope did not actually have a character that told jokes. He was simply Bob Hope. And he really wanted to make his comedy different, fresh, by opening with a topical monologue. So he hired a team of writers who would look through the news of the day, write jokes day and night for the 38 weeks radio season. He would look over these jokes, would constantly re-edit them, work them, and he quickly became a favorite to the audiences with his snappy delivery of his monologues. One of his writers, Sherwood Schwartz, who I believe went on to creating Gilligan's Island, once said the key ingredient in writing a joke for Bob Hope was brevity. Hope's timing and rhythm was obviously unmatched. Other than the monologue, the show also included a few skits of him with his sidekick, Jerry Colonna, and the delightful singing of Judy Garland. And little wonder that the Pepsodent Show was the #1 show in America between 1942 and 44. You can see parts of some of his scripts. So you can see some of his pages in our exhibition. It is known that he would mark with an X and finally circle the content he would use in the broadcast. Here we have pages from the Pepsodent Show that was meant to air on June 6, 1944. He would introduce himself as "This is Bob," then he would insert the name of the military base or camp he was in, Hope. So in this case, "This is Bob broadcasting from Van Nuys Airfield, Hope." This particular material was not used due to the day was obviously D-Day, and the material selected was more somber in nature. Now, Hope originally did not see a point for performing outside the NBC studios, where he had a live, comfortable audience, but he was ultimately convinced to do so by one of his writers, whose brother was stationed at Marchfield Airfield Army Base in Riverside, California. And on May 6, 1941, Bob performed his very first routine in front of the military. It was an auditorium with no AC, packed with 2,000 servicemen. And this is where the radio star was introduced to what would become his most important audience. And for the 144 Pepsodent Show episodes, I believe all but 9 were recorded at military training camps. Now, upon the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Hope did want to enlist, but President Roosevelt had bigger plans for him. He thought he would serve best the military by actually entertaining the troops. And in this book, "I Never Left Home," Hope concedes that he would not have made a very good soldier because he would have worried too much. In spring of 1942, Hope became involved with the Hollywood Victory Caravan, one of the earliest large-scale wartime fundraising efforts, raising money for the Army and Navy Relief Society. And the caravan consisted of 50 stars, including Humphrey Bogart, Laurel and Hardy, Desi Arnaz, Francis Langford. I believe Bing Crosby joined them later in Cleveland, and Hope was the main MC. They toured 12 cities, not New York. I don't know why, I have to find that out. Performing 300 shows. Tickets for the show costed between $11 and $200. That's $11 in is $200 in today's money. And the show raised 800,000 again in 1942 dollars for the water relief funds. And here you can see a program with Bob's actual autograph. Now I have to pause a little for this fun, educational, but entertaining game. This is Bob Hope's Blackout game, published in 1942, sold for 25 cents. As you probably know, blackout regulations were practiced throughout the war on the coastal United States. The drills were common, pretty much where all lights were blacked out due to fear of enemy bombing. During the installation of the game in our gallery, I actually took a look at the instructions. I'm not really good at board games, but I think I could be decent at this one. Pretty much you start in the air raid shelter located in the left lower corner and try to advance 1 mile at a time on the board. And the idea is to avoid the red squares. If you do so, you might have to incur a penalty and pay some Bob Hope dollars. Now, Hope often volunteered at the Hallowed Canteen, which was opened between 1942 and 1945. The club was offering food and entertainment for servicemen, usually people who, military who were either heading out of the country to the front lines or coming back. And the Hallowed Canteen was modeled after the USO's stage door canteen on Broadway. It was founded by Bette Davis, who is largely credited with the Hallowed Canteen's integration policy. Throughout the war years, some 4 million servicemen and women were served, welcomed by 3,000 volunteers, many of them actors, directors, producers, pretty much the entire Hollywood. And from the Hallowed Canteen, Hope would broadcast a number of Pepsodent shows. He actually performed on the opening night on October 3rd, 1942, and also with Jack Benny in November 22nd, 1945. I believe that was the last performance. On display, we actually have a certificate of appreciation and letter of appreciation from Bette Davis. And I have to ask, and again, you'll have to answer in the Q&A section, if you have seen the Hallowed Canteen movie from 1944. And if you did, what is your favorite musical number or guest? I'm partial to Roy Rogers making his entrance as a cowboy on the horse and singing Cole Porter's Don't Fence Me In. It's a great piece. Hope also participated in the radio program Command Performance, produced by the Armed Forces Radio Network, which was broadcasted exclusively for troops overseas. This is the first weekly half hour was broadcast on March 1st, 1942. It was originally recorded in New York and later moved to Hollywood, and the program aired through 1949. Other shows such as Jubilee, GI Journal, and Mail Call were also part of his lineup. Bob participated as an MC numerous times, and in true Bob Hope fashion, he would introduce himself, Bob Command Performance Hope. The show was known to fulfill the wishes of servicemen overseas, just bringing them a sound of home. So, for example, we have Judy they were asking, someone would ask for Judy Garland to sing Over the Rainbow. Someone would ask if Bing Crosby could make a bourbon and soda for Bob Hope, just so the servicemen could hear the refreshing, bubbly sound. And perhaps one of the most memorable skits is when Ordnance Gang 863 asked Hope for Lana Turner to fry a porter steakhouse smothered in onions, so the servicemen could hear it sizzle. And indeed, a steak was brought on the stage. You can watch that video. Arm guard all around it. It was sizzled in a hot skillet for all to hear. And in this letter of request to commend performance that's on display in the show, the boys of the 3rd Infantry Division inquired if the cute blonde of the Andrews sisters is married or if she is available for a date. Now, fun fact, the Andrews sisters can be seen in the Hallowed Canteen movie. The USO, United Services Organizations, was formed on February 4th, 1941. We celebrated 80 years this year, and actually the day before we opened the exhibition. And it was formed by 6 organizations to provide morale and recreation services to US uniformed military personnel. It was founded by Mary Ingraham, the first woman to receive the Medal of Merit under President Truman, and really a New Yorker. She was born in Brooklyn. I'll wait till the end to talk about the 6 organizations if you want. I keep reading more and more about them and how the USO was formed. Now, recognizing the need for live entertainment to boost the morale of the troops, the Uso Camp Shows began in October of 1941. It originally started with just 7 trucks that traveled stateside around military camps, and it later developed into 4 wings, so to speak, the Victory Circuit and Blue Circuit that were operating stateside, and then the Hospital Circuit and the Foxhole Circuit that were operating in the theaters of war. The 1944 USO guide, which you can find available at libraries and digital collections, clearly specifies, that the performers should consider themselves military. And the sentence is, "You're in the army now." By VE Day on May 8, 1945, they were presenting 700 shows a day. And altogether, between 1941 and 1947, some 7,000 performers put more than 425,000 shows all around the world. Bob Hope was the main attraction. You have other great names such as Bing Crosby, Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland, Marlene Dietrich, who I believe was performing in Italy when the D-Day invasion happened, and she broke the news to the troops. Installation shot from our gallery. So for the tours, Hope assembled a vaudeville troupe of his own and referred to them as Hope's Gypsies. Among them, the singer Frances Langford, comedian, sidekick, and trombonist Jerry Colonna, jazz player Tony Romano, vaudevillian Jack Pepper, and comic writer Barney Dean. Between 1943 and 1945, they toured 4 times overseas. And as Hope said it in an interview, it was not enough for them to just send records, of the recorded programs. They had to go. Actually, Bob's first trip out of states to entertain the military was in Alaska in 1942. At the time, Alaska was a US territory for which he needed a special permit. And at the time, he told the press, "Yes, Hollywood won't see so much of Hope from here on out. I've got other plans." He traveled with Tony Romano, with Jack Pepper, and Frances Langford. Here you can see him with Frances, the GI Nightingale. This is not the only nickname she had. She was also called Mother Langford by Hope because, and I quote him here, "She always knew what was best and was always ready with comfort and advice." And because of her warm bedside and manner and her performances in military hospitals, she became also known as the fairy godmother to the GIs. And some of the songs and the favorites for the military were "Embraceable You," "You Made Me Love You," and "I'll Be Seeing You." Now, the first trip into combat area was in the summer of 1943 when the troop visited US military facilities in England, Africa, Sicily, and Ireland, a trip over 9,000 miles for over 2 months. And on the same trip, Bob actually was able to visit his grandfather back in England. It's a great story, and I've never left home. Now, in the transportation order that you see, passenger transportation record, on lower left side, you can see Lester T. Bob in parentheses, Hope. And then in the transportation record to the right from London to Africa, I was reading through it and I noticed there was a weight limit for the luggage he could carry. It's 77 pounds. And then I was reading I Never Left Home, and I found this particular bit about the weight limit. So he says, just before leaving, I saw in my traveling order where it said about the 77 pounds of luggage, and I had to rush out and buy 16 pounds of stuff I didn't need to get. 77 pounds of baggage. That's a lot of toothpaste, but I sold every tube. He discovered early on that audiences appreciated jokes about their locale, their camps, the superior officers. So he would make sure he would get all this information from his writers who would diligently perform research before he would arrive. And they would write constantly. He would recraft, rework the jokes constantly. And he was not afraid that he would offend, be it a GI or a superior officer. In Hope's words, the GI can take it. He's laughing off the ice cold, the searing heat, the bugs and the scorpions, his fears and his frustrations. And yes, the GIs and the officers loved him for the jokes and the teases. There are many inspiring stories of Hope, pretty much following the troops closer to the action, to the front line to entertain them. There's one about a brigade traveling for miles from the front line to the camp to see Hope and his troop, but then realizing there is no space for them, to sit and see the show. So they ended up marching back to the front line. And upon hearing that, Bob and the troop actually followed them and performed just for them. And again, most touching stories are the ones of him visiting the wounded in the hospital wards. And by his own account, Bob said, "Here is where we realized what we were giving was insignificant compared to the contributions made by these men." In Algiers, Hope met General Eisenhower, from which again, this is from a documentary I just watched. He got a picture of Eisenhower, not with Eisenhower. And in Sicily, in Palermo, he met Ernie Pyle, the journalist who covered the war since the German Blitz on London. His column was carried, by hundreds of newspapers across the country. And Pyle got to record the close encounters Hope and his troop had in Palermo. He says every time they'd stop in a city, there'd be a raid there that night. Actually got to look as though the Germans were deliberately after them. Just months later, Pyle would find himself writing the piece for which he won the Pulitzer, The Death of Captain Wascow. That was in Naples in December of 1943. Hope would actually reconnect with Pyle back in Hollywood, where they were producing the story of G.I. Joe. And it is here that the photograph on the left was taken with Pyle writing, "Bob Hope, you bastard, I can't top you, so I'll just shut up, your Sicilian friend, Ernie." It's dated December 20th, 1944, and just a few months later, in April of 1945, Pyle would be killed in the Pacific. Now, from July 10th to August 31st, 1944, Bob's troop embarked on an epic USO camp show touring the Pacific Islands, a journey of 30,000 miles. The tour began in Hawaii with stops in Marshall Islands, in Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, New Caledonia, and Australia. They traveled with the USO Unit 130 in cargo planes, PT boats, and jeeps, and they put on shows, on backs of trucks, on stages made of coconut logs, and of course in hospital wards. And throughout this time, overall more than 1 million servicemen attended these performances. For the Pacific tour, Hope's Gypsies added a new member, a young woman by the name of Patty Thomas, who had a splendid tap dancing routine, and we have her pith helmet here. She actually celebrated her 22nd birthday on Green Island of modern-day Papua New Guinea. During one of her shows in Hawaii, Petty was concerned that the troops would pretty much not hear the tap dancing. So Hope, with his ingenuity, told her not to worry, and grabbed a microphone and followed her all the way on the stage so the troops would be able to hear her footwork. There she is on Green Island. Now, one of the most important stops that had a lasting emotional impact on Hope was on Pavuvu. This is a show for the 1st Marine Division. There was no landing strip there. They had to travel in Piper Cubs, the small airplane, seating pretty much one passenger. And here they were awaited by 15,000 Marines. These very men would ship out a month later to fight in the Battle of Familial. The division would suffer the heaviest losses ever by a Marine regiment. By Bob's own account, 60% casualties. And Hope would recall visiting a hospital ward, breaking down in tears when he heard a Marine say the word Pavuvu. He knew too well what that meant. You'll be able to explore all these stops around the Pacific and the European theater of war. In the exhibition, there's a great interactive with plenty more stories. This is all I can share with you due to time constraints. There is also one of his diaries. This is a diary from 1944 in which he recorded jokes, names of people he met, GI slang terms, meals eaten. On this page that I just pulled from the diary, there is a note saying that he would be the first one to be evacuated. I still question if this is this a serious note, a serious entry, or maybe is a punchline? Not sure. On another page, the word Sinatra stands out. There are some really touching stories as well. He describes in great detail the last rites given to a soldier dying of malaria. So when you come see the show in person, you'll be able to explore each and every page. These two beautiful leather volumes, handmade for Hope, were done in order to chronicle his tours. These were never used actually, but the covers are fun. They illustrate Hope's globe-trotting efforts to reach all corners of the world, be it in the Pacific or in Europe. And I really love the engraving in the cover, the front cover on the left, when you see him parachuting with his tiny suitcase that has the initials BH, and soldiers pretty much breaking the jeep to catch him. So just a really fun detail. Now, as I mentioned, Bob received some 38,000 pieces of mail every week, and he would try to respond to each of them. His assistant, Marjorie Hughes, would help catalog all these letters. He rightfully earned the nickname of the Homefront Ambassador. In one interview, Hope actually recalled being handed a photo from a mother of her newborn son, and asking if he could find and share this photograph with her husband, who was stationed somewhere. Bob didn't know where yet, but he figured it out. During one performance, he was able to locate that husband, and he shared the photograph with him. And according to Bob, the applause were greater and louder than for any other show. In our exhibition, there is an example of a letter received from a parent who lost a son in the war. This is from a mother, Mrs. A.A. Stumpf, who writes to Hope describing the very letter she had received from her son, Andy, a Marine who was killed in action in the Battle of Peleliu. The son says, "It was the most enjoyment we had. I wish they stayed all day, as you never get tired of listening to Hope and Colonna, to say nothing of the girls." His mother concludes the letter to Hope by saying, I can never thank you enough for having brought him those 2 hours of fun. Now, some of the correspondence Hope received was a bit unusual. In the show, you'll see a piece of Japanese airplane inscribed by the Marine Corps on Solomon Islands in 1942. And one of the most fascinating artifacts I've ever seen in New York Historical is this coconut. Bob received it complete with a 17-cent stamp. In I Never Left Home, Hope describes how in Italy the soldiers would keep bringing him souvenirs. One came with a big Beretta machine gun, another group came with a huge box, and it proved to be an Italian rocket. When the soldiers asked him if he wanted to take it home, he said, I didn't want a live rocket anywhere near me. I might find myself riding home on it. Now, still, he could not avoid he could not reject all of the big gifts. As proof of that is this giant propeller he received from the airman training in California at Minter Field. Now, Bob Hope maintained an incredible, unbelievable pace, always working on several projects at once. He had the radio at the time. He had the USO shows. Later on, of course, the television, the Oscar hosting. Steinbeck, in his July, there's a very interesting article dated July 1943. He describes Hope as such. This man drives himself and is driven. It is impossible to see how he can do so much, can cover so much ground, can work so hard, and can be so effective. He works month after month at a pace that would kill most people. And the same year, Time magazine referred to him as a performer who scarcely takes time out to live. Obviously, all the time on the road came with a personal price. That meant time away from Dolores and the young children. Tony and Linda, seen here in the picture on the left. He joked that when he returned home, I quote, my kids think I've been booked there on a personal appearance tour. And again, I come back to the I Never Left Home. Hope also remembers getting ready to leave for England. And as he's heading out the door, his daughter Linda says, goodbye, Bob Hope. And he writes, that's a nice billing, but I'd rather be called Daddy. Right after the war, Bob and Dolores also adopted Nora and Kelly, so the family grew. It's overwhelming to speak of Bob Hope's legacy. But now, referring to the exhibition, strictly speaking about, his involvement with the USO, from the first broadcast, for the troops at March Field in California in 1941, to the one of the first Christmas shows in Berlin in 1948, to what would become the legendary Bob Hope Christmas shows, the ones that were televised, all the way to his 57th and last USO tour during Operation Desert Shield. He entertained over 11 million troops and so many, hundreds of million more at home on TV. He's been cited in the Guinness Book of Records as the most honored entertainer in the world. And of course, he broke ground and worked in pretty much every mass entertainment medium in the modern era, right? You saw in our presentation how it started with vaudeville, moving into theater, Broadway, radio, TV, movies. Hope knew that as a public figure, he also had an obligation to give back and to embrace good causes. And his humanitarian work was recognized with the Congressional Gold Medal. President Johnson honored Hope with the Medal of Freedom. President Clinton bestowed on him a Medal for the Arts. And I will conclude this part with a quote from the actual Congress report that named him an honorary veteran in 1997, the first time Congress has bestowed such an accolade on a civilian. The committee believes Hope's most important contribution to American society was entertaining this nation's troops overseas as the GI's entertainer. This he did with unmatched diligence, perseverance, and grace. Now, this concludes a very broad overview of the So Ready for Laughter exhibition from the National World War II Museum. And I'd just like to say that if you'd like to learn more about Bob, please visit our museum store and check out some of the great books we have. Richard Zoglin's 2014 biography, Hope, Entertainer of the Century, is a must read. It's here with me. Bob Hope, My Life in Jokes. It's a great book, and pretty much you can learn more about his life and incredible career just by reading his jokes. And there is, of course, the American Masters documentary, This is Bob Hope. So check out all of that. I know I went a bit over time. There's so much to talk about, and I'll answer any questions. Was Hope instrumental in encouraging other performers to join the efforts to entertain the troops? I truly believe so. And one example we talked about was the tap dancer, Patty Thomas. I don't know, did Bob Hope ever interact or perform with Kate Smith? You know, I do not know the answer to that, but I would make sure to write this down and head straight after this presentation to Kyla at the Bob Hope Archives, and I'll be happy to find that out. How did the Hallowed Victory Caravan travel from West Coast to East Coast and around the country? By train? Yes, the answer is by train. And I know one of the stops was Dallas, I believe Cleveland, Milwaukee is also on the list, Detroit. Did Bob Hope have any familial connection with the military? Does that mean if he had any family in the military? I mean, not that I know of. The story begins with the family story begins with his father being a stonemason. Were souvenir photo of the shows given to servicemen? You know what? I'm not sure about that. I've have a couple of photos in this presentation and in my folders, and you can see him autographing various photos. So maybe that's what he's doing, is giving some photographs for the groups. Again, another note for me and to look into the archives. And if you'd like to learn more about Bob Hope and the continuing work that the Bob and the Dolores Hope Foundation are doing, please visit bobhope.org. I don't see any other questions. Well, it looks like we ran out of time. It's almost 6 o'clock. We look forward to seeing you back here on Wednesday, May 12th, for the next episode of Curator Confidential, The Art of Architecture, Bill Art's drawings from the Peter May collection. This will be hosted by Marilyn Kushner, Curator and Head, Department of Prints, Photographs, and Architectural Collections at the New York Historical Society. And I wish you all a great evening and hope to see you soon at the New York Historical Society. Thank you.